سلام علیکم من مریم آتش نوابی هستم با برنامه پاد.
Good evening and welcome to Poll. Tonight, an exclusive interview with Mrs. Laura Bush, former First Lady of the United States. Mrs. Bush has been a longtime champion of Afghan women, supporting their rights to education, healthcare, and business opportunities. She is also an honorary advisor to the U.S. Afghan Women's Council.
In 2005, during my first trip to Afghanistan, I announced a generous grant from the United States government to support the founding of the American University of Afghanistan. Today, only 5 years later, the university educates more than 500 students from every province in the country. Next year, enrollment will top 800 students, a growth rate that anticipates more than 2,000 students in the next 5 years. More than 20% of these students are women. They take courses in subjects ranging from business and information technology to the humanities and law. The American University of Afghanistan offers a general liberal arts education, in contrast to Afghanistan's large national state universities. And so its students gain a foundation for lifelong learning and confident leadership.
Mrs. Bush, thank you very much for joining our show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Afghanistan played a role in your life even before your husband became the President of the United States.
That's right.
In your new book, Spoken from the Heart, you share a story about writing a school report on Afghanistan. What was your impression of Afghanistan as you were growing up?
Well, when I had that report, it was in the 6th grade, and I remember it very well because I picked Afghanistan because it seemed the most remote and sort of exotic country, never having any idea, of course, that how important Afghanistan would become to me and to George. And at the time, we just made our reports from the encyclopedia. So I just wrote what I read in the encyclopedia about the farming, the agriculture, the grapes, the raisins, all those sort of things that Afghanistan had then at the time, which would have been about 1957, I think, when I wrote that report.
And going to after 2001, you're the only First Lady who has visited Afghanistan. What were your impressions of the country and people the first time you visited?
Well, of course, I was welcomed very warmly, and I appreciate that a lot. I met a lot of people who I already had either known about or had met here in the United States. Afghan women, Habiba Sorabi, the governor of Bamiyan province, I'd met her when she was a minister in the administration earlier. So I was welcomed by people that I knew, but of course I was also bothered by the destruction, sort of the, not that many buildings standing. A lot of the houses, as I flew over in a helicopter, sort of looked like ruins. And I hope that every day and every week, as weeks pass, that more and more things are built and rebuilt, and that the infrastructure gets stronger and better all the time, and I hope it will.
You said that you were bothered by some things. What did you come away from your trip?
Well, I came away with the idea of how important it is for the United States to stand with the people of Afghanistan, and especially for the women of the United States to stand with Afghan women. I've known that really since shortly after September 11th, 2001, when I gave the presidential radio address to talk about the way women were treated. And right after that, I saw from women that I met all over the United States, including women who worked in a department store in Austin when I took Jenna shopping once, who thanked me for speaking for the women of Afghanistan. And I saw how this very strong friendship grew between American women and the women of Afghanistan. And American women really do want the very best for the women of Afghanistan, and I hope they know that. I hope they can get the message that American women are their sisters 8,000 miles away.
And as the former First Lady, you spent a lot of time traveling around the country speaking about issues, and you chose to include continued assistance for Afghan women and girls as one of the issues that you focused on. Did you find that Americans in general really wanted to help the Afghan people?
I really do think that. I definitely know that about women, the women of America. That after September 11th, when we looked at Afghanistan and saw the way women were treated and not allowed to be educated, American women were shocked. I mean, it was really, the contrast between our lives and the lives of Afghan women was so stark that I could see American women did want to help.
And I want to talk about your transition from the White House. Although it must have been difficult to see the Obama family moving into the White House, you and your husband left gracefully. Why do you think it's important for the American people to see that transition go forth smoothly?
Well, I think that's really one of the hallmarks of our way of government. And that is every 4 years there's a presidential election, and whoever is elected moves in on January 20th, and whoever was lived there before moves out. And of course, we knew that we weren't running again. George had run twice, and he was elected twice, and that's what the term limit is. So we knew when we were inaugurated, when George was inaugurated on January 20th, that 4 years later, we'd move home. And of course, we had seen someone do that, that we love very much, George's parents, and they had lost. It was not that their term was up, but in fact they had lost in that election. And so we knew there's life after the presidency. But it is really, I think it's a very, very encouraging sign for people to see from around the world, to look at that very peaceful transition of power that happens in the United States every 4 years.
And I think the Afghan people would be curious to know, what is it like to make that transition from living in the White House to living back into a private life? Was that transition difficult for you and President Bush to make?
Well, the only reason it was difficult is because our lives were so full when we lived at the White House with, George had every problem in the world on his desk, because every problem in the world does come to the desk of the President of the United States. And then the next day, he just had a clean desk with nothing on it.
Are there any funny moments you remember
we laughed and sort of made fun of him the next morning when we got to the ranch. And we got to the ranch that night after the inauguration, President Obama's inauguration, and no one was there to help us unload the bags. And George was putting the bicycles up in the garage. We came home with several couples of our best friends, spent those first few days with us back in Texas. And then the next day, George got up to make the coffee and sort of couldn't remember how to run the coffee machine after so many years
there was
of
no
not
help.
making it. So there was no help, and you're just back to a very normal life. And we really liked it. I mean, in a lot of ways, we were looking forward to the next part of our lives, because we knew that was it. When your 4 years is up, it's up.
So I was lying on the couch in Crawford the day after President Obama got sworn in as president. And I said, "Free at last." And Laura said, "You are now free to mow the lawn and to take out the garbage." I said, "You're talking to the former president." She said, "Consider it your new domestic policy agenda."
And what do you miss most about being the First Lady of the United States?
Well, I miss the people that I worked with the most. I miss the people that work at the White House, who worked there for president after president. And then I miss the people who worked for me in the East Wing and for George in the West Wing that we got to be such really good friends with. But I email a lot of the people that work for us, and so does George, and we stay in contact with them.
More with Mrs. Laura Bush, former First Lady of the United States, when we return. Continuing our conversation with Mrs. Laura Bush.
Mrs. Laura Bush.
I'm very happy to be here to join each one of you in supporting the American University of Afghanistan, a university that's very close to my heart. Today, more than ever, Afghanistan's future depends on literate, educated citizens men and women. And it's very, very important to support each of the institutions that are making sure people are educated.
And you're here in Washington, D.C. To attend a dinner honoring you for your contribution to education in Afghanistan. Can you tell us about the Laura Bush Resource Center that's being established at the American University of Afghanistan?
That's right. Well, I'm here for, this is a fundraising dinner for the American University in Kabul, the American University of Afghanistan, and I was the one who got to announce that on the first trip that I made to Afghanistan, announce the new university that would be built and announce the money that was coming from the United States government to build the new university. Obviously, the university will raise private money as well and money from corporations. It won't all be funded by the government. So that's what we're doing tonight, is raising money so that more Afghan students can go to school at the American University there in Kabul. And I've met a lot of students from there. I met them when I was in Afghanistan a couple of years ago. And then since, I've met a couple who've traveled in the United States. And so I'm thrilled. I mean, I think education is the most important thing Afghanistan can do, just to make sure little boys and little girls get a really good education, and then for adults who missed learning to read, for them to be able to get literacy classes and learn to read and catch up.
Our last year in the White House, I met with a group of Afghan women, many of them parliamentarians, who reminded me that their fight is not yet over. These women told me they still live in fear of the Taliban. They're afraid that the Taliban's violence will reverse Afghanistan's progress toward freedom. And their message was that we must take advantage of this time, or as one female parliamentarian said, this is our only chance. Her words have stayed with me, and they're a reminder of the stakes in Afghanistan, and they're a charge for all of us to redouble our efforts. Today, we renew our commitment to the women and girls of Afghanistan.
And what will Afghan women be able to access from this resource center?
Well, it's a resource center for Afghan women who are students there, for students themselves, and they'll be able to learn a lot of things. They'll be able to learn about laws that have to do with women's rights. They'll be able to just get support from their sisters and have a friendly place to go to be with other women, and a safe place for women to go and be together.
And if it was something that you had seen a need for when you first visited Afghanistan, and now we're here this evening and you're carrying on this work, why was this important to you?
Well, this is very important to me. Education has always been important to me. That was my career. I was a teacher and librarian, and I know how important it is to every society to make sure everyone gets an education. And I especially want that for Afghanistan, because I think Afghanistan will be able to build a strong, just country when people are educated. And they've got a lot of catching up to do, because so many people did miss being educated.
What do you hope to see the American University of Afghanistan accomplish in the next few years?
Well, I hope that they'll graduate a number of great classes that come up with a lot of students who will be able to use their education to both support their families and their communities, but also to help in the rebuilding of Afghanistan.
Going quickly to another organization that's important to you now, your husband established the George W. Bush Institute to continue his work promoting democracy around the world. How has the Institute helped you to carry forward your work with Afghan women?
Well, I'm excited about that, because I will be able to continue all the work that I've done for women, both in Afghanistan and in other parts of the world, through the Institute. And I've already hosted the U.S. Afghan Women's Conference, the council there, and that focus was on literacy and education. And we had some Afghan students there, Afghan scholars, Fulbright scholars that are studying here in the United States, and other undergraduate students. And then the Minister of Women's Affairs from Afghanistan was able to join us. The new Director General of UNESCO, who's a woman, Irina Bakova, was there as well. And then we heard some great stories coming out of Afghanistan about the numbers of schools and the numbers of young people that are being able to be educated that are increasing.
And literacy has been an issue for you. You've been
Yeah.
a champion of it your entire life. Why do you think illiteracy is such an important issue?
Well, it's so important to be able to read. People who can read have every advantage. People who can read can have good jobs. They can make good decisions for their families. They know how to read a medicine bottle to help their children. It's mothers who can read are much more likely to be strong advocates for their children's education. And so I know it's the building block of all other learning. If you can read every subject.
And we understand illiteracy is just not an issue in developing countries like Afghanistan, but here in this country.
That's right, absolutely. And every country needs to make sure that they pay a lot of attention to the way the people who live in their country are educated.
What are some of the things that you did to help address that issue here in this country?
Well, in this country, I worked with George and the U.S. Congress to pass the No Child Left Behind Act, which was a big education reform act that made sure children learned to read by the end of the third grade, with a lot of special extra money and extra help to make sure children learned to read. And then I started the National Book Festival and the Texas Book Festival when George was governor, as a way to talk about reading and a way for people to meet their favorite authors and get to meet the people whose works they admire in person.
More with Mrs. Laura Bush, former First Lady of the United States, when we return. Continuing our conversation with Mrs. Laura Bush.
During my last visit to Kabul, 2 years ago this week, June 8, 2008, I met students from the American University of Afghanistan. They told me how grateful they are for the opportunity to receive a quality education in their home country. For many of them, it's a dream come true, and they want to use their education to support their families, their society, and the reconstruction of their nation. And they express their gratitude for the financial assistance that enables them to pursue their studies. More than 70% of the undergraduate students receive financial aid. So tuition fees cover only a small part of the university's expenses.
As a mother of two daughters and a former teacher, what would you share with Afghan families who are concerned about the time and expense of sending their daughters to school?
It's so important for girls to be educated. Obviously, we want all boys and girls to be educated, but if both boys and girls and men and women can contribute to the well-being of a society, you're much more likely to be successful. And so I urge parents to make sure that both their little boys and their little girls go to school. It'll make all the difference for your children if they're educated, boys and girls.
Going to the picture of the U.S. assistance for Afghanistan, given all the critical security issues that the U.S. faces in the country, should Afghan women's rights be a concern for the U.S. government?
I think they should be. I really do. I think when we look around the world and we look at the way women are treated, in countries where women are marginalized, where they're mistreated, where they're forbidden from entering civil society, usually those countries don't treat men very well either. We usually find out that if women are mistreated, usually is everyone in that country. We also know that it's very difficult to build a good, thriving economy unless everybody can contribute to it. And if half the population is left out, then the economy won't be that good either.
You've met many Afghan women from a wide range of sectors, from school teachers to entrepreneurs, from mothers to Fulbright scholars. What are some of your favorite success stories?
Well, I love the success story of Habiba Sorabi, the governor of Bamiyan province. I love visiting her there. I had known her before a couple of times, but I really love going back to her province where she was the governor. And that is the province, as you know, where those two towering 6th century Buddhas were that were destroyed by the Taliban and really shocked the world when that happened. So I was glad to get to see her there. Sakina Yakubi, I love how she is and how she is so enthusiastic about building schools for boys and girls. She's really an inspiration to me, and she was at the U.S. Afghan Women's Council meeting, and actually she inspired everyone. She got a big standing ovation and everyone applauded for her.
It's so important for us to stay involved and stay hand in hand with the people of Afghanistan while they rebuild their country. And so I want to thank you all very much for coming tonight, because of course we know the most important thing we can do is make sure people are educated, that boys and girls are educated so they can grow up and rebuild their country.
Now that you're back in your home in Texas, I'm sure that you and President Bush have been reflecting on your lives. Does your husband feel that he made the right decision sending U.S. troops to Afghanistan?
Yes, I think so. I mean, I don't think there's any doubt about it. It's long and it's hard for everyone, but I really don't think anyone in the world would be served if Afghanistan were still the way it was. I don't think that's, it's just wouldn't help the people who live there now or the people who lived there then. And many, many people, many Afghans have gotten to return home that were living in Pakistan or Iran or other places because they had to leave their home country. So I think I want to urge the people of Afghanistan to work together and to build the kind of really good and just society that I know you all want. Afghan women were denied education. And as a teacher and reader myself, I remember my own sadness when I heard that little girls were forbidden from attending school. The stark contrast between their lives and our lives horrified many Americans and gave birth to the strong friendships between American women and our sisters in Afghanistan, 8,000 miles away.
And what do you want the American people to better understand about the Afghan people?
Well, I want the people of the United States to know some of the history of Afghanistan, and that it was not always like we see it right now on television, that it has a very strong and proud history of educated men and women, and it can be like that again.
And lastly, Mrs. Bush, millions of Afghan people are hearing your voice this evening. What do you want the Afghan people to better understand about the American people?
Well, I want them to know that Americans stand with them, that we're not in a war with Afghanistan. We want Afghanistan to be free and to be strong and to be a home to all people, and that's why we're there, and that's what I hope will happen.
Mrs. Bush, I want to thank you for your time, for sharing your feelings and your thoughts with our audience this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.